document submitted by Visit Brainerd is a proposed service agreement. The city attorney has reviewed that agreement, provided proposed revisions and comments on it. That copy of the city attorney's comments and proposed revisions are provided in a Word document that's included in that SharePoint folder link. We're hoping to entertain discussion so that we can move forward towards permanent resolution. If there are no questions of staff, I'd turn it over to Mary Divine Johnson for a presentation.
Any questions of Brad? Seeing none, we will do that. Turn it over.
Good evening. Thank you again for giving me the opportunity to come up and share a little bit more information, kind of try and go through education process and talk a bit about our budget and proposed plan. A lot of this is high level. Some of the detail was provided in the packet, so I'm hoping that you've had a chance to take a look at that, or if you have an opportunity after this, you can certainly follow up and let me know what additional questions you have. But first, I just want to really say thank you to the city of Baxter for working with us and for funding us for nearly 30 years. It's not lost on me or Visit Brainerd that this is a contractual agreement, right? So we appreciate it. We hope we've done a good job, and we certainly hope that we can earn your trust and confidence going forward. So the first thing is just real briefly, the history of our organization. In 1994, the local hotels started the conversation about the lodging tax. And at that time, there were cities all across the state of Minnesota that were pursuing this as an additional funding option for the promotion of tourism and convention spaces. So at that time, Brainerd and Baxter entered into a joint powers agreement. There was a 3% lodging tax that was put in place, and the Brainerd-Baxter Lodging Association was created and operated to promote both communities jointly as a destination. The Brainerd-Baxter Lodging Association and Visit Brainerd is overseen by a board of directors that is primarily made up of hoteliers. So they're the ones who are often saying, here are suggestions, this is what we want to do, providing some insight on the market, and giving feedback. There are some additional representatives from the tourism and hospitality industry in the community as well, so that it isn't just about the lodging, but since the goal is to put heads in beds and generate revenue that way, that's been the history of how we have operated with a one full-time paid staff member in an executive director role. In 2002, the joint powers agreement was dissolved, and that allowed both cities separately to retain 5% of the lodging tax revenue for the administration of the tax. In 2008, the Brainerd-Baxter Lodging Association got on brand with brands and visitor bureaus across the country and changed their name to Visit Brainerd. As you know, branding and trends and those kinds of things influence all parts of commercialization and marketing. In 2020, we opened an information center and gift store in downtown Brainerd. You've probably all heard me say it now, but the running joke is we decided to come above ground. We had an office in the basement of a bank. People were finding us there asking for visitor information, and they really want to have a conversation with people. And so we decided to come up above ground. We spent 18 months trying to decide where to go, considering traffic patterns and accessibility. And quite frankly, it was a leap of faith, and so we made the decision based on cost. The rent in downtown Brainerd was cheaper. We didn't know if this whole thing was going to work or if there would be a need for it, and it's proven to be very successful for us. We welcome about 2,000 people in the door every summer, or throughout the whole year, primarily in the summer, and made that we have one-on-one conversations with. And here we are today looking to the future. So our budget, the total expected income is $536,000. The lion's share of that obviously is coming from the Baxter lodging tax. So people have asked me throughout the conversations here this last year, how much is it? It's 86%. I just want to be completely transparent and tell you what it is so that we can, whatever that means for you, we can certainly try and meet those needs going forward. Comes from 8 different hotel properties in the city limits of Baxter. We do get lodging tax from 2 properties in the municipal campground and some VRBOs in the city of Brainerd. We also have some non-tax revenue and a contract with the Brainerd EDA. We earn about $5,000 a year doing some advertising for them, and then sales of the gift store and some different sponsorships. And then each year there's a grant that's provided by Explore Minnesota Tourism, which is the state of Minnesota's tourism entity. Our expenses, you can see, it's just short of $200,000 in operations and $328,000 in programming. We're really proud of that number. We love the idea of running lean. I mean, I don't always love it because sometimes it's hard, but that we can put more than 60% back into programming. One of the sources that kind of helps guide destination organizations is an organization called Destinations International, and they do surveys every 5 years based on the size of your budget. And so the size of this budget, you will see on a national level, typically it's flipped. 60% is going into operations and 40% is going into programming. So I'm pretty proud that we're able to do what we can do with those dollars, so as much as possible is going back into marketing and advertising. So as you can see on the next page, I may have to flip between slides here, but we have a multimedia approach to our advertising. Let me pull up the other one here. I don't know from your packet. This is the plan overall that hopefully you've seen, but this gives you a little bit more of a breakdown of advertising as a whole. You see that, or do you need me to zoom in? The gist of it is we take a multimedia approach to the advertising specifically, which means we invest in print advertising, we're investing in broadcast, radio and television, we're investing in digital advertising, events and promotions, printed literature, and then our website. And so some of those things overlap and work well together, but we've got a really balanced approach here, and this is a recommendation. We model our material largely off of what Explore Minnesota Tourism does. They have bigger budgets and can work with large agencies, and we try to use the resources that we have available to mirror what we should be doing in our market too. So I just wanted to share with you kind of the breakdown of where those advertising dollars are going. But beyond that, we do digital marketing, content marketing, event and partner marketing, and provide visitor information. And so the research to inform our advertising strategies comes from Explore Minnesota, it comes from our website, it comes from our social media traffic, and it also comes from working with vendors who will provide research for us, whether it's Nielsen data or Scarborough consumer insight data. And so we take a lot of different resources, plus the anecdotal feedback we get from the hoteliers, and our own good sense of what we see in the marketplace and things that we think are working. But the places that we can really emphasize Baxter and try and help build a Baxter brand are what we think we're doing now already in digital marketing and content marketing of telling the stories and sharing information about local businesses. We highlight the hotels, we highlight the breweries, we highlight the shopping, we talk about different things that you could do when you're in the community. We also talk about things that you can do not in the community, like golfing and fishing, but we know that the feedback from the hoteliers is that people are staying in the properties and going and doing those things. I just wanted to share too that in our print advertising, we are often using pictures of Baxter assets, and then there's a caption that says, Whipple Beach, Baxter, Minnesota. And so even though the logo says Visit Brainerd, we're doing a lot of things to try and help, make this a combined and shared one community, even though it's 2 cities in the overall marketing strategy. But we can't ignore the fact that Brainerd is the brand that's known and has been known for 100 years. And as soon as we get additional cues from market research, which we're always looking for, and also feedback from hoteliers on national change saying that we should continue to try and move away harder from that, I think our compromise of doing it in the content and the narrative and the writing and the captions is hopefully a fair compromise. But we love more feedback. We love more suggestions, and we'd love to figure out how to work with you on building a brand for the community. Do you have any questions so far for feedback? Okay. I did include in the packet, and I don't want to go through all of the specific details, but I did want to share with you that the overall advertising plan for the year is in here. These are the proposed plans so that you can see kind of the seasonality of what we do and the messages that we're promoting and who we're targeting. And so again, it's a very brief overview, so if you want more details, please let me know. We can sure provide that. But I guess at this point, I'd really like to talk about ideas that the board of directors has and Visit Brainerd has for the future. We've been doing strategic planning since I came on board in 2017, and we go through and discuss it every fall and try to make sense of what are the opportunities that are there. And we know we need to build the Baxter brand, both because of the funding perspective and the desires and just the changing landscape of the community. We've been doing this for 30 years, and even though the name has changed and some of the strategies have changed, the mission is still to drive people to this community as a tourist and convention destination, but that doesn't mean that there aren't other changes that are needed and required and would be beneficial for us. So we'll continue to co-brand and identify Baxter in the ways that we can. We also want to promote a different experience. The easy thing to do when you think of Brainerd is to promote cute kids jumping off docks, right? And golfing and fishing and a lot of the things. And that's an asset we definitely need to build on. But the way that this community has developed between Brainerd and Baxter, there's a much different story to tell about an urban experience with retail and dining and arts and culture, plus some of the outdoor experiences that you can have, whether it's at a public beach or along the Mississippi River or on one of the city trails or at a city park. And that's something that we've been trying to work on for the last few years of telling both of those stories. Another strategy for us is to develop micro meeting and sports market. What I mean by micro meetings is we don't have a convention center. We don't have a traditional space in our community where we can invite hospitality, conventions, trade shows, that type of thing to the community to host large events. We have been having conversations with the Essential Health Sports Center to see if that's a space that we can better utilize when they don't have ice on it. We're always in conversations with the Northern Pacific Center. You've got the Lodge, which has some convention space, but otherwise our hotels are largely lodging. And so micro meetings are your continuing education classes, you know, that you can come in and you need just a couple of meeting rooms and some lodging, and inviting people to our community in those ways. And it would help us further develop that convention component of the business of tourism marketing in this community. Before we can run, we've got to walk, you know, into that space, and it's something that we haven't been doing a lot of because we don't quite have the facilities that we need to do that. The next part of it was we'd really love to develop a tourism master plan between the two cities. It's, you know, we've got two different government units that have developed together, but what do we need as a joint community? What should we be looking at for 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now? Is it the development of a convention center? Is it the development of a sports facility? Is it the development of a campground? Is it the development of different spaces that would help bring people to the community? And what does that look like from a funding standpoint, or from a legislative standpoint, from, you know, working with state and local officials? And so having an ongoing conversation that Visit Brainerd can be part of or help facilitate is something that we've long had a desire to do. And then lastly, which I've already hinted at a couple of times, is to explore the feasibility of new assets for the community as a whole. So those are all 2025 to 2035 ideas. All of them would come mostly with your blessing, right? I mean, the board of directors can do what they can do, but we can only do it if we're funded and working towards a common goal, and the development of the community and the sustainability of our economy is first and foremost for why we exist. So with that in mind, where do we go from here? What does success look like to the city of Baxter? What do you want to see from Visit Brainerd in order to feel like your 86% of an investment in our organization is being met? I think we have the confidence of the hoteliers, the lodging entities for sure. I think we have the confidence largely of the hospitality community. I think there's still a lot of work to do. I think there are a lot of people that aren't sure if it's Visit Brainerd or the chamber that's calling when we're doing promotions and things like that. I'm aware of that. That's something that we're always working, but I would say that I think is something we can continue to work on and grow and develop. So what does it look like? Is it increased lodging tax revenue? That would be one of our key performance indicators, is hopefully a 5% year-over-year increase in the lodging tax. Is it increased sales tax revenue from visitors? And trying to figure out how to measure that, whether we're working with LADEC on Visitor AI data, or if we are working with an outside consultant. There are plenty of consultants that will give us a report on economic development impact if we want to pursue that and have Visit Brainerd pay for it, or partner with you on paying for it, whatever that may look like. Is it increased city name recognition, which would be hard to measure, but we can talk about it as an objective, right? And as far as search terms and how many times are people hitting our website or Googling Baxter, Minnesota, things like that. Let's set a benchmark. Let's give a baseline and then a goal to work toward. Increased partnerships with Baxter businesses, obviously, right? We want to do that. I think we do that now, but I don't even think they always know. I'll pick on Patrick since he's the new guy, but I don't think he has any idea that we share his posts 6 times a week, right? And then we don't always say that either. And so it's one of those things where we need to do a good job of partnering with businesses and letting them know what's going on. And then what else? What does success look like to you? And maybe you have answers tonight and maybe you don't. Maybe it's something we need to continue to explore. But some other key performance indicators that we've identified are 1 million unique website visits, 100,000 user engagement through our social media, email marketing, and mobile app downloads, at least 24 unique local business and event partnerships, which would be new event and business partnerships for this year, and then 2,000 visitor inquiries that are answered, whether it's email, phone, or walk-in at Visit Brainerd. And those are metrics that we'll start tracking and be reporting back on for you. So I guess at this point, how can we meet your needs? How do we earn your confidence and reassure you that we're the right partner for the city of Baxter, and that it's a good investment to continue to put your money towards this initiative?
Okay, thank you. Just have and I don't know, maybe we're not comfortable answering this, but I've always wondered, how is the relationship with the chamber? Is there camaraderie there, or is it, I don't know how to say it tactfully.
No, that's fine, and I'm not gonna give you a very good answer.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say complicated,
Yeah.
right? I think it's cordial. I think when the opportunities present themselves to work together and it makes sense for both parties, we do. I wish there were a better working relationship, but it's what I've identified in my time doing this, because when I first started, I took every idea I had over to the chamber and said, hey, let's do this, let's do this, let's do that. And the challenge is, since they're a membership organization and a very large one, like 1,000 members in a 45-mile radius, maybe larger, there will always be membership and revenue barriers on their side. So if we wanted to work on something together, and we have a hotel in Baxter that isn't a member of the chamber historically hasn't been inclined to promote that member, that hotel, if they're not also a member. And that's just a very simple example. And I don't fault them for that. But that is literally one of the best reasons why you have a totally independent organization and a visitors bureau. Is that, I mean, in our bylaws, we have one class of memberships, which is the hotels, but it's there so that we can pull those people off the marketing if they ever stop funding. If they ever stop paying you tax, they get pulled off the marketing. It's the only thing that we have to take away, if you will. But otherwise, everything else is unbiased. We'll talk about what makes sense for the visitor coming to the community. And chambers are inherently there to support their members. And since they're a nonprofit corporation too, the other goal is to make money and to stay afloat and stay in business. So when I asked if we can do a joint visitors guide, it's like, well, we made money on that. You know, what would it look like? How do we change the advertising schedule and those kinds of things? Can we do one website? Well, we can't list people who aren't chamber members. So in a very simple, and it's, I mean, no disrespect.
Yeah.
I have spent a lot of time trying to figure out how we could do this.
I understand.
And the simple answer is membership and revenue barriers. But when there is a joint campaign that comes up, oftentimes we will write them a check and say, yeah, let's do it. You know, we have supported in the past the other chambers in the region, and Visit Brainerd used to do advertising and Explore Minnesota tourism publications together. And Visit Brainerd paid the lion's share of it, you know, because we had the lodging tax. Those relationships, unfortunately, those initiatives have dissolved because we can't agree on, you know, return on investment and things like that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I didn't mean to put you on.
It's okay, yeah, and ideation, that's my wheelhouse. I want ideas. I would love for somebody to come forward and say, how do we do this? How do we figure it out? And I don't know exactly what that looks like, unless it's something where we were to move more towards a county tax or something like that, because even a regional tax, the chamber pursued trying to do a regional tax here in the last 18 months and working with the resorts. And as soon as you have a couple of properties who aren't interested, it falls apart. And you can't fault them for that. So it's, even though it's not the perfect system, this lodging tax by government boundaries is good, and an independent visitor bureau is good, because it just takes away some of the layers of complexity.
Council, your comments now.
A couple of things. First of all, congratulations on your nonprofit, your award. It's
Thank
nice
you.
to see that article in paper. And then second, I don't have any mistrust towards the organization whatsoever, especially after meeting with you a few weeks ago. Just the only wish I have would be that Baxter would be more pronounced, you know, Visit Brainerd, everybody knows where Brainerd is, and honestly, when people ask where I live, sometimes I say Brainerd, but really it's Baxter, but they're right next to each other. I wish that there was a way to make Baxter more pronounced, but I'm sure a rebranding process would take a long time and be expensive. But just in the things that you promote and, you know, your print advertising, you say that Baxter is in the caption quite a bit. Would there be a way to make that more present rather than just in the caption? Look for opportunities to really make Baxter more of a focus.
Yeah.
in written things.
Absolutely. The other thing that I've shared, I think, with most of you that we've had one-on-one conversations on is Visit Brainerd owns visitbaxter.com as a domain, as a website domain. You know, we have some assets like that too, that if you ever wanted us to develop a bit of a brand or a landing page or something like that around that so that we could start working towards the branding or the co-branding in a more aggressive way, let's do it. Let's have the conversations, so long as it, you know, makes sense to the overall end of putting heads in beds, right? So that we're continuing to generate that lodging tax revenue. Because if we don't have that, then, you know, we don't have that. You know. So, I mean, there are things that we can certainly do that I assure you that the board and the hoteliers and the business owners have been looking out for years, that are there, and we haven't had these kinds of
time, well, overtime, actually, should have happened a while ago, but I'm glad it's happening now.
But yeah, we sure can. Yep, I can take a look at making it more pronounced and including it and giving more presence there. So,
Yeah, I think I'd echo that as well. Excuse me. You know, being in a, you know, owning a brewery and going to beer festivals all around the state, nobody knows what Baxter is. So it's, I start with that. It's like, well, yeah, we're in Baxter. And it's like, well, where's that? It's like Brainerd Lakes area. It's like, okay, got it. And our joke is that, you know, at a beer festival, you know, Brainerd is the city that everybody drives through when, or Baxter is the city that everybody drives through when they think they're driving through Brainerd. I know we've got, you know, billboards and or entry signs and the water tower, you know, blazing Baxter up in front. But so I do like, and I think it's going to take a long time to move that shift because people know Brainerd. But I do like that center bullet point in there, increased city name recognition, even if it's like a 10-year goal, something that, you know, we'll look towards and work towards. Especially because Baxter is providing the bulk of the funding, you know, for the organization. And I have a feeling that was probably one of the initial items of contention, I think, was that Baxter is contributing this lodging tax to an organization that promotes Brainerd. But I can see that as a justification because nobody knows where Baxter is.
It's complicated, right? I mean, and in my own little world, every day I tell somebody I'm not the chamber, right? Okay, so it's kind of a comparable just from that perspective, and so I appreciate the frustration and all the things with it. It's also complicated from the perspective of us being the community inside of this regional destination, you know, and so we can do it. We already are. We can take more steps towards that and be more intentional with it for you. And I think, I hope that you just even knowing that we are doing some of those things now will help, you know, reassure you. But it's a long-term strategy, you know.
Well, that's kind of my point. I've been here over 30 years, and it was this way 30 years ago, and no one's really pushed it. And until we push it and say it needs to be done, it's just going to continue on. I mean, the brand should be Greater Baxter. You know, I know it's the Brainerd Lakes area, and I know every time we go to you know, League Minnesota cities or something, oh, where are you guys from? It's Baxter, but you know, thanks for Brainerd. Until we actually make an effort to do it, nothing's going to change. And I would push so far as to say, change the brand to Visit Greater Baxter. If not Baxter, Brainerd.
Going with the alphabet, huh?
No, I'm kidding, but, you know, and we see businesses in our own community promote themselves as being in Baxter when or being in Brainerd when they're really in Baxter. And, you know, until we, you know, I think when I first moved up here, it was, oh, we're the Minneapolis, St. Paul of the North, you know, we're the Twin Cities of the North. Well, we're not billed as the Twin Cities of the North, you know, and until you do that, you're not going to change that perception.
Okay.
The other question I had, and it was in the way of funding, do you spend on an annual basis all of the tax dollars that we send your way?
No. Predominantly, since COVID, we made a bit of an effort to put some money in reserves so that if there were ever a catastrophic situation, that we would still be able to operate. And so this year, right, this budget that I have showed you here would be spending everything that's coming in and going out. And we have been close, I would say within 10%.
So how much is in reserves right now?
Currently, there is, once the funding and everything that comes in here, once that funding starts, there's about $500,000. So, which is about 1 year operating. And the goal has been to get to 1 year operating. The other thing too, just to be completely transparent, because the lodging tax revenue has specific ways that it must be used on the advertising and promotion, we have been making an effort to build up the non-tax revenue, which is also part of that fund balance.
So do you keep those as separated funds?
We are going forward. We have them separated on, in our QuickBooks previously, and just now here in January, we are dividing them into separate accounts. So it will clearly say non-tax revenue and then reserves.
Because the concern I have is we are responsible for how that money is spent according to the statute. And once it's paid to you, we kind of lose that. I mean, we can review an annual budget, we can approve an annual budget, however you want to word it. But when you put things in reserve on a nonprofit, if something catastrophically happened to your nonprofit, then that money is distributed to other nonprofits, as opposed to coming back to the city and being used for advertising. So that's where I have a little bit of concern, and it's something I think we need to work out with our attorney to make sure she's happy with how it works.
Sure, and that's fine, and like I said, we did go back through, and now we have them split into separate accounts, so it's very clear that the 5 years we've been operating above ground, that revenue, the grant dollars, the EDA fund money, that is all what's in reserves. So, there is a balance in our checking account that would be for operations and programming. I think we'll spend it this year. We're looking at some big expenditures in terms of exploring the idea of doing digital kiosks that we could have, like at the Arboretum, potentially at City Hall, things like that, that would be sort of related to visitor information services that would be expenditures as well. But I appreciate the concern, Mark, and I know that you've got a lot of experience with nonprofits, and that's fine. Let's figure it out and go forward so that there are no questions or concerns. So.
Okay.
Go ahead.
The other thing I wanted to say too, just to come back on the conversation about the non-tax revenue, is we don't know what we need in the community yet, right? I mean, I can't sponsor a new event with lodging tax revenue. I can advertise it, but I can't sponsor it or build something. I can't make a donation to a park. I can't put a contribution towards a sheet of ice, like, those kinds of things with the lodging tax revenue. So I assure you that the board has been very diligent in trying to build up that non-tax revenue, because we get asks that we can't fulfill. And we'd like to be able to be in a position to help better the community and tourism industry as a whole. So I just put that out there from the perspective of if there are long-term goals that would make sense for still fundamentally putting heads in beds, that's the intention for that non-tax revenue fund. So.
I'd like to share a couple of non-scientific polls,
Please do.
but I'm in Rochester twice a year, and have been for over 20 years. Yeah, when I first started going down there, you have your blood draw first, and people say, "Where are you from?" I say, "Baxter." Nah. Now they know. People go, "Oh yeah, we're there. We go through there a lot." That's changing. Is what I'm trying to say. That the mentality is changing. People, if they've been out of their jurisdiction, so they're familiar with where we are. I think the perception is changing. People do know where we are. Maybe not enough yet. The other indicator, and this is really hokey, but when you're, we drive Highway 10 a lot, so when you're coming up into Little Falls and all the billboards are along the right-hand side there would always be Brainerd. And people got braver that said Brainerd Baxter, and now most of them say Baxter, because they've gotten brave enough. Even DJ knows in Baxter. And so say is that, maybe I'm naive, but I don't think they have to hide from it, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and I think that that's fair, and the community looks a lot different than I'd say 30 years ago, you know, or 10 years ago even. I mean, and it's going to be, always be an evolution. But truly, and again, just to make one last shameless pitch for Visit Brainerd, you know, the reason you have a visitor bureau or a destination marketing organization is we are thinking about the community and how to best have an impact with the visitor economy every day, right? That's the only thing we do. I'm not doing workforce development, I'm not doing legislative affairs, I'm not doing networking, I'm not, you know what I mean, in terms of other initiatives. This board, this organization is always only thinking about this. And so, could we do a better job? Absolutely. Do we need to be reminded to change with the times? Sure. You know, and absolutely. So, please don't hesitate to bring the ideas or ask the questions or, you know, look for more information or anything like that. I can't stress that enough, that we love to partner with you and be a part of the success of the economic development of the city of Baxter.
Also, any other questions or comments while we got her here?
I do want to, again, Councilmember Tabbitt is under the weather and apologizes for not being here. He did email me a few comments and statements that he wanted me to share in that context. The first one it goes back to what he said is accountability. He wants to make sure that the $460-something thousand that is being given to Visit Brainerd has a return on investment and economic impact analysis that hasn't been done. So for every dollar of lodging tax, how much is pushed back out in the economy? Something that he really would like to see and try to attain, because as he talks to people, all of us that know Councilmember Tabbitt is all about data in that context, and that's something that he truly would like to, you know, to see us try and achieve in that context. He agrees with the other comments that were made earlier today about branding, as he has written here, as being 86% of the funding source, there needs to be some effort made to branding of Baxter. He's open to ideas as to how that would be, even encouraging that we look at outside entities to help us build a strategy into doing that. And he knows that that's not going to be overnight, but to the extent that Councilmember Sundberg has indicated is that we need to be putting things on paper as to what we're trying to achieve. And then last, the one thing that he did note that is something that he really would advocate for is if we were entering into an agreement, if that's the direction of the council, that he believes that an annual audit would be money well spent by the organization to assure compliance with all Minnesota statute. He understands that the 990s takes care of the IRS and things like that, but it doesn't give a guarantee of compliance with Minnesota statutes as to the expenditures of those dollars. And so he has indicated he wants to see a component in the contract if we go forward that an audit is included into that. And that will be shared with the council.
That kind of brings up a question. You do a federal audit.
No, we work with C. Johnson and Associates on all of our bookkeeping, and they do our 990. And so their recommendation has been, because of the way that we have operated, there isn't necessarily a need for the audit, and so don't spend the money on it. If it's a requirement, we'll do it, right? If it would make people feel better about that, that's fine, let's do it.
There's a threshold that is $725,000. But I'm not sure if that's a combination of savings and annual income.
I think it's,
If it is, you're probably there.
yeah, I was gonna gonna say, I think it's just the annual revenue, but I'll look into that and make a note of it as far as the federal audit, you know, question there, no problem. And some of it too is, you know, you learn as you go, right? And as operations change and as it gets bigger and there's more money coming through, you know, it's fair. Let's do it right, so.
Yeah. Anything else, council? Next steps, Brad?
Well, as I had indicated at the beginning of the conversation, is we're looking for directive from the council as to how they'd like to proceed in regards to a long-term resolution towards the lodging tax collection and the relationship with Visit Brainerd, if that is what had been shared by the attorney previously with the resolution. Visit Brainerd did submit a proposed contract that has been reviewed, redlined, and comments made by the attorney. Be looking for feedbacks, things like the audit is a part of that membership makeup. In that context, some cities appoint, some cities leave it to the entity. The directive or the questions there are trying to gear towards getting what the council's thoughts or opinions are, so that if the directive is to formulate an agreement or arrangement, that we know the basic, or the parameters in which the council would like to see in a final document.
So it sounds like there's maybe a couple of steps left, right? There's the determining what the formal agreement or arrangement may be, and then assuming that it's Visit Brainerd, coming back and making sure that we're on the same page from, you know, to simplify it, how to better build the Baxter brand, right? And how can we meet some of those desires, whether it's changing the name or continuing with the co-branding strategies or being more intentional. Does that sound accurate? From my, so I've got name of organization, the return on the investment, more Baxter, and name recognition, and then spend out funds and an annual audit were kind of the key takeaways for me. I just want to make sure that that captures your sentiment.
What is our process in that? We have another workshop,
Yeah, absolutely. We're having this conversation as early as possible, knowing that we have probably 2 council meetings after this, or work sessions after this, to really iron out the details. I too have written down a few of the items in that context, added the provisions in regards to unspent funds and things of that nature that would have to be reviewed by the attorney and given feedback on. But is there the general consensus that we work towards putting together a resolution and service contract or service agreement for council's consideration?
I would say yes.
Based on the comments received in the directive and as it relates to what's been shared tonight.
I would say yes.
I think so, yeah.
Is there anything else you need from me at this point? And I love to talk. I'll come back whenever you want. I told Eric it would be quick. It's not quick tonight, unfortunately, but.
We have a draft order there, so.
What a draft order. Oh, 218-821-4997. So, and if you have ideas, please share them. I would love to make this the dialogue going forward. And again, thank you for your time and for your consideration. And we really appreciate the relationship and look forward to working together and doing a good job for you. So, appreciate it.
And if you want any hotelier input or feedback or have questions, I'd love to take your calls or
Okay.
anything like that.
So, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, who's handling number 2?
Sorry.
assessment noting. We're working on the 2026 Brentwood Circle sanitary sewer roadway improvements. We're going to go through the PowerPoint presentation for the feasibility report, which is on the agenda tonight for approval, and then to update the capital improvements plan.
It should be noted is the report isn't on tonight's agenda. That's
Oh, it isn't on
it's
tonight?
February 4th agenda.
Okay. Sorry. Okay, so project area, it's Brentwood Drive located off, or excuse me, Brentwood Circle located off Brentwood Drive in the Cedardale area. The project area currently has water that was installed in 1987 by the developer. That's what we can find as far as records go. At that time, there was no sanitary sewer available to the project area. That was installed in 1990 on Brentwood Drive. So it was developed with just water and roadway at that time, paid for by the developer. No assessments on the roadway for that project. Proposed improvements include bringing in sanitary sewer off of Brentwood Drive. Water improvements would include doing some rearrangement of the water main at the cul-de-sac. Right now, there's an extension that goes to the northwest. It was thought that maybe someday they could be looped through the neighborhood, but there's really no need for that, so we rearranged the water main and just end it with a hydrant at the end of the cul-de-sac. This is one of those areas where we have potential issues with plastic water main tees. I actually found some pictures showing that they are indeed plastic in this area, so we've included that as a replacement part of this project as well. And then the first two lots off of Brentwood Drive, they would also get sanitary sewer and water services. They're currently served off of Brentwood Drive, but they are large enough to be split, so we have included services for them as well. And we'll get into that discussion a little bit later here when we talk about assessments. Roadway improvements, currently it's a 24-foot wide road. We bring that up to the city standard of 26-foot wide road and then put in the ditching to handle the stormwater. Estimated project cost, $209,000 for sanitary sewer, water distribution about $52,000, roadway $264,000 for a total project cost of $525,000. As far as how the project is paid for, be paid with assessments to benefiting property owners. Those rates have been set by the council. 2024 rates are sanitary sewer is $5,556, and that'd be the same for water. And then the roadway is $7,408. 2026 is when this project is projected to happen. So the rates would be $5,894 for sanitary sewer. For the water, area already has water, but we've included a cost of $2,625 per lot for those two lots that would get water service off of, for those first two lots off of Brentwood Drive. And then the roadway cost would be $7,859 per ERU. And then remaining costs would be city costs. So for sanitary sewer improvements, estimated project cost is about $203,000. There are 13 ERUs, and that would be $76,620 in assessments and $126,000 remaining in city costs. There's also 11 existing homes. We collect the SAC fee at that time, sewer availability charge at $600 per house. So that'd be another $6,600. So the total project cost with the SAC is $209,185. Water improvements, $552,000. Two water assessments at $2,625 a piece. And so that brings the city's cost down to $46,945. And then for the roadway improvements, $264,000, 13 ERUs, total assessment would be about $102,165, and the remaining cost about $162,000. Here's the assessment exhibit for the project area. So each red circle on the drawing, it represents one sewer and water. One sewer and road assessment, except for the two assessments for those two lots on the south end. North is to the right. They would get assessed for sewer, water, and roadway at the rates previously shown. And then these are the two lots we need feedback on. The one on the left is on the left-hand side of Brentwood Circle, and then one right is on the right-hand side of Brentwood Circle. We met with city staff on these, similar to other projects where we kind of go through and look at if the project can be split, or if the lot can be split according to the city ordinance, subdivision regulations, and these two lots were determined to be capable of being split based on that analysis, and that's what these two drawings show. So we're looking for some feedback from the council on if this is really what you want to do in this area. We'd like to get approval on these before we finalize the report and set it on the shelf for now. The intent is to the intent of this project is to include it with the other 2026 projects. But for right now, we're just looking for, approval of these and then getting on the CIP. So
just so I'm clear here, so those two splits would only be getting the water assessment, or you're going more out of them?
they would be getting a water service and a sewer service as well, because they're not served with a second sewer service, and then be getting a roadway assessment too. So,
So what?
Assessments and then one.
no, just one sewer, the one water at the reduced rate, and then the roadway assessment.
So what would that number be? The 7,800 is a,
I did
That's
not
roadway.
add that up. It'd be the 5894 plus the 2625, and then the road at 7859.
and the road,
Yes.
Then the road would be double if the lot was split.
one across the street.
No, they wouldn't be getting, if they couldn't be split on this job, if the lots weren't large enough to be split, they would be getting no assessments because they're addressed off of Brentwood Drive. But because they're large enough to be split, they could get two new lots that would be addressed off of Brentwood Circle. So that would bring them into an assessment for this project, according to past practice.
Right, well,
Yeah.
we had a little discussion at utilities about this. So if they were to be split, these homeowners would have to pay what was it, what did it come to, 14,000, something like that?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't add them up.
So it's 14,000 plus, then there was another, how much just to actually split the lot between the surveying and the sack and whack and the park dedication fees, was that another $14,000?
I think
we talked
Trevor
about.
threw out a number, yeah,
So
somewhere 10,000.
you're looking at somewhere around $28,000 that's gonna come out of a homeowner's pocket in order to create a second lot and build a house on that one lot to the south, 5 feet from their patio. And in reality, I don't think they're gonna do it. But yet, we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna assess them for the $15,000 now, because that's our policy. I think what we're lacking, and we have this in Southwest Baxter, where they coming in and saying, hey, let's buy your development rights so we don't get too close to camp. Well, maybe that same process ought to happen here with people. If you've got that big lot, you make the decision of, yes, I'm gonna split it, or no, I'm not gonna split it, and then you sign an agreement basically giving up your right to break it up into further lots. And, I mean, right now, we're seeing that around the southwest edge of our city, and we have no control over it, but yet, I think that's a tool that could possibly be used here to say to these people, I understand you've had this lot for I don't know how many years. I mean, these houses are at least 30 years old, I'm guessing.
It was, these were platted in 1987, when they started building railroad.
And here they've been here, been established, had water and sewer, both those two. And now just because they're a corner lot, because of the rules, I don't know, I'm looking at a way to try to alleviate some of this cost on people, because it's building someone's going to spend $28,000 to sell a lot for 30.
I've got 3 comments. One, we just went through all this with Forest View and we divided them. And so now we're gonna change the course and say we're not gonna do that anymore. I don't know where the fairness is in that. That's one issue. The second issue is that, Mark, you've experienced this because you've been here. You're gonna know what I'm gonna say. We've had people say that. I'm never gonna, somebody have one lot, I'm never gonna divide it. We put a brand new road in, they're in the next day. Now we tear the road up to put that service in. So it would seem to me that, if nothing else, we should put the stubs in, before, even if we don't charge them or whatever the policy is gonna be, because I hate that when we wreck a brand new road and now we got bump. And then, those kind of third point, what was it, do you have an idea?
Well, no, I don't, but I'm curious, let's say the homeowners, I get you most of the time, but if the homeowners were to sign an agreement saying, no, they will never split their lot, then if they choose to sell with the new
Maybe a
buyers.
deed restriction.
Yeah, I'm with you, Mark, I don't wanna charge that large amount, and I remember having 2 that we had discussions about, and those 2 homeowners came in, and they had reasons as to why their lot shouldn't be divided, and we didn't double assess it. Yeah.
We haven't even gotten to the cost of this project yet, and what the city is subsidizing on these. To get 11 existing homes serviced, if we figure it was about $20,000 per lot is what the city's gonna be kicking for.
So any ballpark numbers of the mechanics, what it would cost to put the stuff in and walk away from it, or?
Oh, just for the city to put stubs in,
Yeah.
$5,000 to $10,000.
Yeah. And is it enforceable? I heard you say, deed restriction. Is it enforceable if they sign that? It seems like people can wiggle out of just about anything anymore, so I don't know.
That's a question that I've written down to share and ask our city attorney.
Okay.
I believe our community development director wants to speak.
Well, there's conservation easements, which we've done with developments in the past, where it is a deed restriction that runs against the property. Whether it would work in this context, I agree with the city administrator that we want to check with the city attorney. The only thing that I would just caution is, how would you look at that in other contexts if this is just a one-off situation where someone has, a massive piece of ground, that we'd use that same argument to kind of cut it off. Conservation easements, if it's a deed restriction that restricts conservation forever, in perpetuity regardless of ownership, could preclude the city's ability to subdivide it densities too. So it's kind of a potentially double-edged situation. So just for what it's worth for the conversation.
Because it's gonna come in mass, Brad, when we get down your road, we get down to Steve Jones, 6 acres at the end of your street down there. We're gonna have a lot of those conversations.
Yeah,
Well-
the next 2 reports that I'm working on have a lot of large tracts, just like the developer was talking about, that, they really, to make it feasible, they need to be split. You gotta treat them like they need to be split. That's what I would caution you too, is that you need density to pay for these improvements going forward. You can't just skip lots, you need the density.
I mean, my neighborhood, I'm right behind Best Buy, and ours was 20-some years ago, and we have a lot of lots that were split. And we were one of the ones that could be split. We didn't have enough square footage, but there was a lot of them, and some of those lots have been sold off. Yeah. It's like I think I got, one of my comments was, it's like, if I could have a lot that I could subdivide right now and sell off to pay off my assessments, I would love it. It's not great, but it's there. And yeah, to your point, putting in stub outs right now is the time to do it, rather than sometime somewhere down the road.
mind, our assessment policy has several methods in determining the way we're going to assess a project, and historically in residential, it's been by ERU. So it's number of ERUs are based upon number of square foot. In this area, Josh is at 100 or 75 linear feet. Do you know offhand, Josh? Or Alex, maybe you know.
The frontage?
The minimum lot width.
Yeah, 100 feet, and then 15,000 square feet.
Yeah. So in that context, that's where a lot of the pushback has been over, the forestry projects and things of that nature, which then we did these lot analysis to determine if they can be subdivided or not, and to share them with the council to get their feedback. And that's really what Eric has done to this point, is to do that feedback. If there couldn't be subdivided, as Eric has alluded to, based on our policy, there wouldn't be an assessment fact on the size of the lot, and that it can be subdivided is the reason why it's included in the feasibility report. We're looking for council feedback there. With everything, there is pros and cons. We're asking council to consider those and provide us feedback so that we can finalize the report and bring it to the council for acceptance. And then again, Eric, just for clarification, this isn't 25, so
26.
it's 26. So the improvement hearing and things of that nature would be scheduled latter part of this year.
Yeah, I think, the way we have the schedule laid out, it's, we are looking to get, kind of answers on these in the next couple of months, so that process can start. Yeah.
I know that, part of me says, with what Mark said, if you can get a need restriction so they can't do it, that's fine. The problem is it takes another lot off the distribution and the helping with the cost of the services and the system itself. If it's gonna cost 15 grand, is to put, this is one of the reasons, back in the day, when people would sit right there and say, I'm never gonna split it, it's only one lot. I got it from Uncle George and Aunt Tilly, and we're never ever gonna get rid of it, Joe. A few weeks later, they were splitting it, and so, and tearing up the streets. It just always bothers me, because everybody else has to drive across that road, so I'm just dead set against that. But if it's gonna cost 15 grand for the city to hold the cost to put the pipes in, I'm thinking out loud, as you can tell right now, but I'm concerned about that too.
Well, Mr. Mayor, you're concerned about just holding $15,000. Understand that to put this sewer and water project in, the city is going to fork over $20,000 per lot.
Yeah, I heard that.
As a subsidy. Because individual lot owners can't afford to put these in. And yes, we only have, what, 5 more of these that we have to deal with, but they're all gonna be just like this, if not more expensive.
One, for me, whether or not to split a lot, it can be split size-wise, came down to, like you had mentioned, sure, it could be split, but it would be 5 feet away from someone's deck. That's not reasonable. So I think we need to look at, it's gonna come down to looking at an individual decision based on the lot, isn't it, in a case like this?
Yeah, and Forest View, what we found on Forest View was the 3 dimension that was why we nullified some of them, because it didn't work with the heights. But in this case, I think it's fairly flat.
It's fun.
And, so
But
that's
it was
not
also
the issue, it's just
placement of, but I thought one of those, it would be really close to an existing home too, where the driveway would cut into someone else's
Could
driveway.
have.
Well, I guess we're gonna try to finalize it for the February meeting, but
Yeah, the conversation that we've had internally in the last week was, getting your back and providing Eric and staff the opportunity to make adjustments as was given, based upon the direct feedback given tonight, allowed to make the changes. One of the things that I do want to bring up in my conversation with Councilmember Tabbitt, and most of you probably know where this is going. In that context, you did have a question that I want to make sure is on the record. Is the existing roadway, it has two 12-foot lanes, so 24-foot wide, and proposing to go 26 with 2-foot or 1-foot shoulders. In that regard, he, has been the case in previous projects is kind of dieting, road dieting, things of that nature. He wanted to know what is the reason for going from 12 to 13-foot drive lanes, and can we not keep it at 12 foot?
You could keep it at 12 if you wanted to. The Baxter standard has been, 13-foot lanes, 26-foot wide for the longest time. That's just what, your policy has been on roadways. I don't see any issues with, going to 24-foot section. 12-foot is kind of a normal lane, but it is nice to have that extra width on a rural section so you're not driving on the edge all the time. That's the only thing that's kind of nice for a rural roadway.
Yeah, I don't think he had questioned the 1-foot shoulders on each side, knowing that we're doing ditch work similar to what was done on Millwood with last year's project. We're trying to regrade the ditch and get it back to original design.
Well, yeah, in this case too, we're putting in sewer and, that the whole road was gonna be ripped up completely to put in those utilities, so it's more like going through the forest view.
Sure.
Neighborhood.
Yeah.
Well, it makes it extra complicated because these two houses are on Brentwood. They're not even part of Norwood. I mean, I know it's their side road, but they're technically not part of.
I already got picked the first time. Yeah, on the street,
So how would council like to see a final draft structure? Is it with or without? What is the reason for this, so that it can be included into the report? And then, is there a directive in regards to road width?
The other question I brought up was, where do all these subsidies come from? And the answer was, we're working on the CIP. Well, is this a levy issue? Is this coming out of our levy? Because, $200,000 out of a levy this year would have been 3%.
What I would share with you, Councilmember Cross, is part of that overall conversation where we're having cash flow analysis that council, recall in November, gave approval to enter into service contract with PFF, which is our financial advisor, to run cash flow analysis under the various scenarios that we outlined in that work session in November. We're anticipating that to come here, being presented to staff, hopefully by the end of the month, waiting to receive an update on that. We haven't forgotten, there's that bigger picture conversation that ultimately will identify what a CIP looks like. And we'll be looking to have conversation with the council once we're able to digest that information and get things structured so that we can have a good work session where that's the sole topic, or work sessions, I should say, where that's the sole topic, so we can come up with final resolutions as it relates to our payment management program, our CIP, our in that context, if we don't get to it, we could pull it from all consent and have that conversation. But, I think really looking for, as Councilman Cross said, is it 11 ERUs or 13 ERUs? The difference is the two corner lots. And then secondly, what is the roadway width? Is it 12 feet or 13 feet? Per lane. Sorry.
What was his reason, this wants less bituminous or what?
Well, Zach is, has always been of the
Right.
position that, don't need to overbuild, in that context, and he's been an advocate of making sure we have minimal expenditure related to our revenue.
I would be curious just what the cost difference is too,
Okay.
with on each side.
Well, we will, there was a lot of information in that context. You guys know the questions, we'll let it fester a little bit, let it digest. But we'll put it on other business on the 4th, get you the answers, and then we'll be looking for that final feedback. So,
Hi, I'm Melanie Knighting, SEH. I'm here to present our final findings, I guess, for our well exploration work that we've been doing. A few of you maybe got the opportunity to stop up there and see all the fun. So, just a little background. Back in May, we completed an evaluation of your existing well field. And the city has been having some problems with the wells, with the clogging of the screens and the formation of the filter pad. We also determined that well interference between the wells was contributing to that problem. And then we evaluated the kind of the zone of influence of the pumping wells from previous pump tests and things like that. And we established an optimum well spacing of about 1,000 feet. So if we are looking to try to replace capacity in the existing well field, we wanted to set back from those existing wells. So as a result of that, we recommended that replacement of the lost well capacity in the existing wells by completing 2 exploratory borings to potentially, put in replacement wells essentially for capacity. Okay, we, look to try to locate those wells about 1,000 feet away. We, recommended that we try to work with existing city property, east of the water treatment plant, so that we can facilitate kind of bringing that water into the plant or with the existing well field. And then we recommended that we use a particular drilling technique, using sonic drilling, so we could get 100% recovery. We wanted to kind of fast track this as much as possible because of your water needs. We did get some competitive bids on the drilling services, and that was awarded to Trout. And we drilled 2 exploratory borings. One we called EB1 had favorable conditions. EB2 did not. But with those borings, we logged the soils. We collected soil samples to help design for a future water supply well. In the EB1, where the conditions were favorable, we also had a preliminary pump test just with a temporary well screen. And then we installed a monitoring well that could be used for future monitoring and stuff during the development of the actual water supply wells. With the exploratory boring 2, we logged the soils. We did collect the soil samples and we installed a monitoring well, but we didn't do the preliminary pump test. Ultimately, based on these findings, we moved toward adding locations because the one was not favorable. So to kind of look at this, the wells there in pink are your existing well field, and your water treatment plant is just to the east of that. And our EB1 and EB2 are the two that kind of line up straight north and south there. The one to the north was good, the one to the south not so good, okay? So we worked with your staff to identify some potential alternative locations. We tried to move across the street over to the EB03 there, and things didn't look very good there as well. So eventually we moved in closer to the existing wells. It bothers us a little bit, but it's still better than what we had before. And a drill hole there, and those were favorable. At each of the locations, we logged them in detail, describing the soils, and with the installation of the observation wells. The soil samples, as you can see, were continuous samples, so we got really good information. This one particularly happened to be in 10-foot runs, and you can kind of see that, you know, we got good soils at that location. And then we collected those soil samples, and those were forwarded to Johnson Screen to give recommendations on sizing of screens and length of screens and filter pack materials for the development of a new water supply well. In the location where things weren't as favorable, you can see some of the materials there, especially where the 95 is located there. That material it's more like a modeling clay than it is sand and gravel, which is what we were trying to target. And so those things were documented. As I indicated, so we ended up focusing on you'll see that MW means we put monitoring wells at those locations for EB1 and EB4. With those additional ones, we drilled EB3. Things were not favorable. We logged the soils, but we sealed the boring out. There wasn't any value to keeping that one around. And like I said, with EB4, they were favorable. We did log the soils. We did collect the soil samples for designing a well screen. And then we did also conduct a preliminary pump test through a temporary screen, and we installed the monitoring well 3. With the drilling, we also did water quality sampling at the monitoring wells 1 and 3, because that's where we're looking to try to put replacement wells. And we also installed some transducers in all 3 of the monitoring wells, just kind of see what we got out there now as far as water levels and what the aquifer is doing. And we surveyed those drilling locations. So those are our permanent document for each one of those drilling locations, even the ones that weren't favorable. Ultimately, the hydrogeologic conditions that we determined out there, we got some complex kind of things going on here, and I'll show you a little bit more. There's a till, which is a clay-based material that is present, but it is locally eroded away, which becomes more favorable for your purposes. It was a very dynamic depositional environment for these, and so we're finding that in the future, essentially the last bullet there is, in the future, we have to take that into account. There is variability from location to location. It will require drilling every time, before you would ever move forward with that. It's just too variable to say it's always going to be good, or favorable conditions here. So we did update some geologic cross sections from what we had done before. And the one thing, this is running from south to north. So on the south side there, you can see that we have the Mississippi River there at the surface there. But the one thing I wanted to point out is the light green area is that till unit I was telling you about. And if you'll notice that at one point you could tell those were connected. And then as the glaciers receded and the meltwater came off, it washed out and it eroded that away, and then it was filled back in with additional material. So that's that dynamic thing that's kind of going on. This is the cross section from west to east. We're seeing the same thing. We see this clay till, it's on either side, but at one point it was all connected. And we're trying to tap into this material that's in between. But because of the dynamics of that environment, you will get some of that clay that's washed down from the sidewalls, and you will get some backing up of water when seasonally and things like that, where we get kind of like more of a clay lacustrine type of deposit. So it's a very dynamic environment that we know where to look, but we can't guarantee that it's always going to look as good as we want it to be. And even in some cases, we see little remnants of that till here and there, but we see that clay material as kind of a remnant there. As I indicated, we did some pump testing out there, so we brought the pump out there, and we were taking measurements, and during the pump test, we were discharging that water. The data that was collected, we did what we call step drawdown. We kind of start at a lower rate and pump for a while, then we increase it, and we just kind of see what we can get out of our temporary screen that we have there. And as they indicated, we use a 20-inch or 20-foot screen, a 6-inch diameter temporary screen there. Did the step down. We pumped essentially from about 100 up to 265, which is really just the capacity of the pump that we had. And we didn't see any significant drawdown during that pumping. Now that's not your final design of a well, but it gives us something to work with versus no information. And then we were able to estimate the transmissivity, which is what we use to determine their availability for water. There is transmissivity, which is 8,300 feet squared per day, which is pretty good. So it confirmed that we feel we have a potential for a significant yield here with proper well design, essentially, what we concluded with that. We also collected water quality samples, as I indicated. We compared it to some 2019 data from your existing wells out there, and we did find that they were pretty comparable. There's a few variations. If you know, for instance, with iron and manganese, that iron's higher in your existing wells, it's lower in the newer well locations. But the manganese is lower in the existing wells and higher in the newer wells. So you get some little variation there, but talking with Kevin, he felt that it was comparable enough that it shouldn't cause any significant changes to your current treatment system to bring this water in. And so, like I said, so ultimately things were pretty identical to what we're seeing in your existing wells. Ultimately, we sent those soils over to Johnson's Screen, and they did come up with recommendations on screen intervals, on they were looking at 12-inch diameter wells, and I don't think that's about, I was 25 feet, they're 35 feet on the first one there. So some lengths and everything like that, and that's the information that Kevin and his group have now taken back and are working on the design of those wells. As I indicated, we also put in some monitoring wells that we can keep out there for some time there. They'll be useful with the development of the well field there. And we left them in there for a few months actually. And this happens to be depth to water, meaning that we've seen quite a bit of variability in depth, meaning when your existing wells are kicking on, the water goes up in this case because it's the depth of water, so it gets greater. But ultimately, it was telling us that even if these wells, monitoring wells, are between 500 and 900 feet away, from your existing wells, we are still seeing your existing wells impacting the water levels in those wells. So we looked at that a little bit more closely, and we got some of the data from AE2S on the pumping data we just looked at a 24-hour period, and where we could definitely see how each, when the pumps kicked on, and how this is now elevation. So, every time the pump kicked on, the water level was dropping. So there is a definite correlation there. And then just kind of summarize those findings is that for that MW1 location, which is the very first place we drilled out there, it takes about 8 minutes for the water levels to react. And we're about 900 feet away there, and it drops a little over about a foot during that time period. MW2, which is also around 900 feet, that also takes about 8 minutes, but it drops a lot less, but that's where we were seeing more of the clay. So I think the clay is kind of protecting those a little bit. And then MW3, which is closer, is about 500 feet, also takes about 8 minutes, but it does drop more, and that's because it's closer to the existing wells. It's having more of an effect. So ultimately, the findings are, is we feel the aquifer conditions are suitable for the installation of new water supply wells, fondly called number 5 and number 6, to replace the lost capacity in your existing wells. We did, like I said, the drilling confirmed we have some spatial variability in the soils out there, so we need to look at each location closely. We selected the 2 locations as the most favorable. The water quality is anticipated to be similar to the existing wells, so we shouldn't require any changes in the treatment. And the design criteria should consider what was recommended by Johnson Screens to kind of optimize and maximize the pumping. And then, although we're less than 1,000 feet, we do feel comfortable that even when the other wells are pumping, we're only seeing about a foot of a drop in these existing locations. That makes us feel a little bit better. It's not 0, but a foot is better than if we're seeing 10 feet or something like that, which now then we would be very concerned. Back in September, we had also presented a new well field evaluation, someday moving beyond this existing well field. And we had made some recommendations of 4 different locations. And during the preliminary design for bringing in these new wells, the question came up, what size pipe should we put in? Are we ever going to bring in water from the east into here where we would want this to be a larger pipe? Well, we didn't know because we haven't drilled out further east. So we went out, did a little bit more investigation. We'll see, in this location here, there, you can see the existing treatment plant and the wells around there. So we worked with your city staff to identify a drilling location farther north and east there of the plant. And then we also went down south in the development down on some available property down there.
Can we just pause for a second?
Okay, sure.
The regular council meeting was supposed to begin at 7 o'clock.
Okay, I have to minutes.
No, in that context, we'll just pull 13 and 14, which is the acceptance of the report, so you can finish.
Okay.
Once we start the meeting.
Okay.
If that's acceptable to the
Yeah,
council.
we got people waiting for
There
that
are
too,
people,
so,
I just want to be cognizant of the people.
sorry about that.
Okay.
So, oh, you're good.
Have a motion to adjourn the,
You're
gonna do consent, right?
Second.
Consent is right at the beginning.
Yeah. Okay.